Marianne, you want to call the roll, please?
Mr. Richard?
Here.
Mr. Ruska? Mr. Jepson?
Here.
Dr. King?
Here.
Mr. Welch?
Here.
Mr. Welch? Mr. Singh?
Yes, here. Okay, so we have a quorum. We're now going to move into the public hearing on the 2014-2015 budget. And with a quorum being present, the first order of business is to hold a public hearing on the budget, prepared in a tentative form as set forth in the minutes of the meeting of the Board of Education held on July 8, 2014. The Secretary of the Board of Education has admitted an affidavit and certificate of publication from the Suburban Life stating that a tentative budget for District 208 for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2014 and ending June 30th, 2015 was placed on file and was conveniently available at the district administrative offices. Notice was given that a public hearing on said tentative budget will be held at 7 p.m. on September 9th, 2014. Due notice has been given of the public hearing on the budget and all other statutory requirements preliminary to the holding of such public hearing has been complied with. Dr. Skinkis and Mr. McGinnis will present and explain the 2014-15 budget and answer any questions from the board. Dr. Skinkis, Mr. McGinnis.
Tim, you want to just go over the summary and then speak to the questions that we received?
Yeah, as was mentioned, we started back in June with presenting a tentative budget to the board. Made some revisions based on information we received after that time. For the July board meeting, when the budget was, the tentative budget was approved by the board, and it was advertised and available in the business office and also on the website. This meeting, that the board has to approve the budget, has to adopt it. By law, it has to be adopted by the end of September. The overall budget, without probably one of the biggest items is that we're transferring $6.5 million out of working cash into capital projects to work on the projects on the west side of Gulf Road that we have scheduled. Without that transfer of money out of working cash, we have about a $25,000 surplus in this budget. So the assumptions that are in the budget highlight some of the more significant items. In terms of revenue, we're going to receive some additional money because we're now doing the food service for District 94. Most of the other revenue items, aren't increasing that significantly. And in the assumptions, we highlighted a number of the expenditure items and the increases or decreases that we're seeing there. There were some questions on the budget. One had to do with the fact that we were budgeting $6.5 million in expenditures in the capital projects fund for next year, even though we know that we probably aren't going to complete all those projects by June 30th of next year. We're going to start those projects presumably in the spring or even in the fall as we begin demolition, and they aren't going to be completed. But in talking about this at the last few meetings, I thought that we had agreed to leave that budget number as it was, even though we probably won't spend all that money. The balance, there would be a balance obviously in the capital projects fund at the end of the year if we don't spend all that money, and it just carries over to the following year. There was a question regarding the tax calculation worksheet. Looking at the percentages increases comparing this year to last year. One of the reasons that I include this tax calculation worksheet in the budget is that the tax levy that we have that was 1.7% is for a calendar year. And obviously the taxes we collect go over 2 fiscal years, so it's not simply the 1.7%. We're also dealing with a percentage from the year before that. In addition, we're dealing with a formula that the county uses to distribute the money, where they give us 55% of the money of the prior year levy in March, and then they make up the balance in August. So it's difficult to look at tax dollars and look at the percentages in comparison to last year and see a percentage that's equal to what was the 1.7%.
But should it be a magnitude of 10? I mean, shouldn't it? I don't understand. I know that the relative difference. On a relative basis, last 2014 budget over 13 actual was about 2% greater. On a relative basis, 2015 budget over fiscal year actual is, you know, 0.25%. It's off by a magnitude of, 10. I know the numbers aren't going to be the same, but I don't understand why on a relative basis they aren't similar.
I think it's just a factor of how you calculate it using the two different CPI percentages from two different years, and then also the difference in the percentage that the county uses in terms of distributing the money.
Okay.
There are 2 or 3 other questions. One about fuel and one
There
about
was a question
personnel.
regarding driver's ed. We had a decrease actually in the driver's ed from a .2 position to a .3 position. And in the bilingual programs on page 32, we had a decrease from 1.0 last year to 0.5 this coming year. So that's the reason for the variation in terms of the salaries and those two
Why
areas.
is the driver's ed going up? And why are we adding people? We anticipate more people taking driver's ed this year or something?
I think we have more people sign up for driver's ed.
There was a question regarding, we had reduced the budget for natural gas for next year by about $50,000. Question was, is that based on supplier input? Yes, it is. The company that we deal with gives us a budget for the coming year in terms of what they think we're going to spend. There was a question regarding the fuel cost. When I came to you a month ago, we said we were going to put everything into one account, but in talking to...
Page, Tim.
I'm sorry, this is on page 42. We found that in order to control field trip expenses, it's better to separate that into at least 3 different areas. One is athletics, the other is student services, and the other is general. It's easier for us to control and track those expenses and make sure we stay within budget on those. And then the final item that was noted was what I had talked about before, where the expenditures in the capital projects fund are budgeted at $6.5 million.
Okay.
The question on the $6.5 million is that majority of that work, even if we start April 1st, won't be completed until August or possibly even later. So what happens to that money if it's not spent? Does it stay in that fund or does it transfer back to?
No, the money stays in that capital projects fund. Once the board transfer that money, we've transferred over $250,000, which is what the board approved last month. If we transfer over the rest of the money up to the $6.5 million, that money, if we haven't spent it, is just going to carry over to the following year. It'll
Well,
stay in that fund.
But one of my other concerns about it is, don't we have a goal to try to stay within our budget each year? Isn't that one of our goals?
Certainly.
So now if we're we have a goal to stay within the budget.
No,
We're setting a parameter.
To
where-
correct you, the goal is that the fund balance at the end of the fiscal year matches the budgeted fund balance. So what we did on the summary page of the budget,
Right.
is we took out that $6.5 million, so that was not in the projected fund balance.
Okay.
Correct?
Yes.
So our projected fund balance at the end of next fiscal year will be about 45.4%. And that's minus you can see it's written up on the bottom of page 8.
Okay.
All right, is that all the questions that any other questions for Tim or Dr. Skinkis? All right, from the board, okay. The meeting will now be open for public discussion, and all persons desiring to be heard will be heard at this time. The Board of Education welcomes and encourages the participation of its citizens in the business of the school district. Thank you for your attendance. Citizens are welcome to ask questions or make comments. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If a person would like additional time to address the board, such a request should be submitted in writing 48 hours before the meeting to the superintendent. For more details, please refer to Board Policy 2:230, public participating at Board of Education meetings and petitions to the board.
Mr. Cindy, is this for clarification, are we looking for public comments in relation to the budget?
This, and that's what I was going to say, the public, what we're seeking public discussion on is only focusing on the budget that is in this public hearing. When we come back out of the public hearing and go to our regular meeting, there is 2 points in that meeting where you will have visitor statements. So right now, we just want to focus on any public comment on the board, on the budget itself that is being presented for the public hearing. Do I have anybody on this side that want to speak on the budget? Do I have anybody on this side that want to speak on the budget? All right, seeing that there's no further comments from the public, I now declare the public hearing on the budget completed, and the regular meeting will now proceed.